now. All right, the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to set up a new canvas, and I'm going to do 18 by 24. And I've got a little folder here with just a few images that I grabbed off of Google this morning that I'm going to start with. We're going to open up this guy cooking a turkey first. Now, if you go up to image size, you can see that it's only 1.2 inches at 400 dpi. I tend to do everything at 300. You guys may have, you may work completely different than me. I tend to work at 300 all the time. If you're doing something for online, you would do 72 or whatever, but 300 is what we're going to do. I'm going to make the width of this guy about 18. We're going to resize it later. Now, when Megan was showing you guys stuff in Illustrator the other day, Illustrator's amazing at vector work, and you guys are, this is a raster image. So who has no idea what I'm talking about when I say vector raster? Okay, good. If I go back to when I opened it and I zoom in, you can see that it's really pixely, as I zoom in like that. After you resize it and I zoom back in, it's not so bad. That's because Photoshop does this thing called interpolation. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but it makes up what it thinks is supposed to be there. So as I enlarge this thing, it didn't always do that. Like it used to, I think probably CS3, it would just give you these huge pixels. So you guys are pretty fortunate in that. And I think Illustrator would still do that. Illustrator doesn't do interpolation. So if you have a raster image and you need to resize it, don't resize it in Illustrator, resize it in Photoshop, and then place it in Illustrator to do whatever you're going to do. Now you guys can see that it's not straight black and white. There's yellows, and if I zoom really far in, there's like these little imperfections and stuff like that. The thing that we need to do for Illustrator, or for screen printing, is to get everything to be black and white. Since this doesn't really have any gray tones that I want to save, I'm just going to come up to image adjustments and do threshold, and that's going to make everything black and white. You can do curves, you can do levels, you can do that however you want. This is just a really quick Mickey Mouse way of doing it. I'm going to say okay on that. I'm going to come in here with a paintbrush, and I'm just going to close everything because I'm going to put a color field behind him, and I'm going to do that with the paintbrush. So anything that's open, I want to close. And you could do that with the pen tool. You could do that with, however, since this isn't a vector image and it's already somewhat rough, I don't think the paintbrush is not going to look bad. I need to draw a line over here, so this isn't the best line. There's going to be some of these things that I'm doing really quickly that if this were actually going to be a graphic, I would probably slow down a little bit and take my time. We're going to add a color field. Let me drag this into my canvas. There we go. We don't need him anymore, no. People that are using Macs, that's a pain. Like to open multiple windows like that, you have to go into your settings. So I don't know if you have something open, if you have this picture of Tom Waits open, and you pull it over here and you click behind it, that disappears, doesn't it? Yeah, that's a pain. Yeah. It'll let you, yeah, I mean, you can drag it in, but I think, I thought on Mac, like, it would disappear as soon as I clicked it, and it kind of went behind the Photoshop thing. If it does, I apologize. What I want to do now is I'm going to add a color field behind him. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to name this layer black. This is going to be my black. I may have misspelled that. This is going to be my black layer. That's always going to be on top. I'm going to come into layer properties and name that and change the layer properties to multiply. What that does is that allows you to see through the white parts and not the black parts. And if you do that on a photograph, you're going to see through the lighter parts, and the darker parts are going to be opaque. So I need a new layer. What color should I put a color field behind him? Somebody yell out a color.
Olive green.
Olive green. So how's this right here? Something like that. I'm not going to bother measuring. We're just going to highlight this, put it on Paint Bucket, and say contiguous, however you say it, all layers, and I'm going to drop some, and you see I missed some of that, so let's go back and find the spot that it's right there. It is. I need to close that. Wrong layer. Still need to close it. Alright, let's inspect. You guys understand what I'm doing right now, correct? I'm just making sure everything that I use the paint bucket on is contained, and it seems to be good now. Except for that shirt. Okay, and I'm going to get that, and I'll get that. So this is going to be the green layer. Select, deselect. If we were going to print this, and I'm going to come in and I'll add some text here in a second, I want to add a stroke around this because I'm going to turn the opacity down just so you guys can see, put green underneath of the black. Turn the opacity down on the black layer. And let's say that we actually mess up on our printing and we shift the black a little bit. What you get is that white line right there on against the sleeve. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah, right there. I want to give us the freedom to be able to mess up a little bit. So the way that you do that, if you come to the green layer, go to blending options and apply a stroke to it, and just make the stroke the same color, then you see where it overlaps. So that way if the black shifts to the left a little bit or to the right a little bit, you'll be okay. You won't get this hideous white line. And sometimes I'll go around and I'll get rid of that stroke, you know, and actually draw it in with the pen tool or something. It really depends. But you definitely want your colors to overlap a little bit so that you have some freedom for the screens to shift, because I can promise you the screens are going to shift. If I wanted to add a color to his vest, I'm going to make another layer. Come in here, make another layer, and we can name this red. And you do the exact same thing. You can either use the paint bucket and go in, or use the brush. I can use the pen tool and actually draw this in as a shape layer. And this is, obviously I would be a little bit neater than this. So I'll do one sleeve so that you guys... How many of you guys never used the pen tool? It'll take you 2 days to really get used to pulling the little arms and getting the curves that you want, but after a while it's really second nature. So it may seem intimidating at first, but learn to use it. It's really not as hard as it seems. So if I were going to print this, I would print the green first, then I'd print that red sleeve. I'd probably go in and fix this and have the red and the green touching one another, and then you can print black right on top of it, and you see there's a little mess up right there. But this would be a 3-color screen print. I also want to show you guys, there's a print that I had done recently where you start mixing color fields and halftones in the same print. So let's say for the jacket that I wanted to have some sort of gradient that's worked into the graphic. I'm going to open up this texture here. Image rotation. So I'm going to add this gradient to his jacket. And then I'll show you guys how I would go about making this. And this I'm going to do really quickly, that I would definitely take much more time. So I'm just going to select everything that would be his jacket here with the, not the magic wand, whatever that guy is called. Quick selection tool. Thank you, Xavier. Okay, so I've pretty much got his jacket. And now I'm going to drag this selection of the jacket over here. If Photoshop is getting mad at me. Oh, let's put it on another tool. There we go. Okay, and now I'm just going to cut this. And you guys may end up cutting and placing things. I don't really place a whole lot of things because I just never got used to it. So however you get the image over there, that's up to you. And you see I took a whole bunch of stuff that I don't need. So we're going to put that on multiply, and I'll just go in and erase the stuff that I don't need. Now, we obviously cannot screen print this texture. Like, it's not going to look exactly like this. This is a good way to soften things up a little bit, to add some kind of realism. Or talking and photoshopping is not one of my skills. Okay, so I've got this thing. Do you guys want the jacket to remain brown, or do you want it to be a different color? Do what? Brown is nice. So I'm going to the way that I'll leave it at brown, but the way that I would change it if I wanted to, I would just come in here and go to color balance, and if I wanted it to be blue, I would start shifting it over this way towards more blue or towards more blue, and you start getting these, a kind of a blue tone to it, or shift it over this way, make it a little bit more green, make it more purple, whatever. That's how I would adjust this, just through color balance, really easy. I want to drag the jacket into a new file because I cannot do what I want to do on this canvas. So I'm going to drag this over here. We know what it looks like. It still exists right here. What I need to do now, and I'm going to go ahead and fix these underneath of the lines, but I would have taken more time. Otherwise, I'll just use the hill brush just to create some sort of texture right there. There we go. That's a little bit better. So what I need to do now is to make this CMYK. I know all of the graphic design people in the room are like, you don't already make it CMYK. This is RGB, so we're going to make it CMYK. We can flatten it, it doesn't matter. You come over here, here's your channels, right next to your layers, there's your channels. We're going to want to separate this thing into the individual channels and halftone each one of those layers. So this is the cyan channel. You can come up here to image mode bitmap, say OK. Now for cyan, I've got it written on my hand. Leave it at 300 because that's what we're working at. The frequency is going to be how much detail that you can get when you do the print. So if you have a super high mesh count screen, you can have a lot of detail. If you have a super low mesh count screen, you're going to have much less detail. There's a whole math equation where you take your mesh count and you divide it by 4.5. That's going to be about the best that you can get. We're going to stick with 26 right now for the frequency. And if you guys get into this and you start screen printing and you completely forget it, send me an email, I'll remind you. Now the angles, we want the angles to all be different. The different angles for each channel. Otherwise, all of our dots would sit on top of one another. So for the cyan, we're going to make that 15. And we say OK. And if you zoom in, now it looks like there's some gradient there. You see this dark spot, but when you zoom in, all you see is black and white dots. You have to have black and white dots. You cannot have gradients in screen printing. So we're going to take this over here. We'll change it back to grayscale. And we'll just drag that. Now this is going to be our cyan. So we can just say 100% cyan, not 1,000. 0, 0, 0. And then if we zoom in, we can apply. We'll just make that blue. And now if you come over here to the layer, we can name that cyan. And you change that to multiply. We'll turn the old thing off, what it's actually going to look like. And you can move that to where it belongs. This is its home. So that's going to be a blue layer, and then we will go back and do the exact same thing with each color. So we're gonna let's do the magenta at least, and then we'll see what this guy looks like. And like I said, leave it at 300. The magenta angle is going to be different than 15. We're going to make that 75. And if you forget those numbers, you can just Google CMYK angle screen printing, and it'll pop right up. Grayscale. Okay, drag that over there. Go to layers. This is going to be magenta. Change that to multiply so that we can see through it. And so far, this is what the thing is going to look like. We will start with printing green on white paper. Then we print the cyan. Then we print the magenta. And you see it actually, when I did the things, oh, it did all layers. That's why. Let's go back and undo that. We'll move it. Okay. Then we will print magenta, and then we would print black, and that's what, so far this is what the poster would look like. Now do the same thing with yellow, and it's gonna look a little bit more brown. I'll do that really quickly so that we can kind of see. And there's probably not going to be much of a black layer. That's not even worth doing. So let's just do the yellow. Image, mode, bitmap. Okay. The yellow angle is 90. Oops, that's 300. The angle is 90. And then we'll drag this over there, put that on top, and make this yellow. Does this somewhat make sense to most of you guys right now? The black angle is 45. The black angle is 45. So it's 15, 75, 90, 45. I actually wrote it on my hand because I constantly get them mixed up. But seriously, if you Google, it's probably going to pop right up because I Google it. Yeah, I type in CM and it types in CMYK, and there's no internet connection. But trust me, it comes right up. It's the very first thing that comes up, and it gives you those angles.
I'll put it under the pages.
Yeah, and you guys will have this YouTube video also. Put that on multiply. We're going to move this down. So it somewhat looks brown, and it's a little bit sloppy because I'm not really taking my time. But right now this would be a green layer, a yellow layer, a magenta layer, a cyan layer, and a black layer. And we could easily turn this green layer into, let's just say that the green layer is also going to be yellow. So now you only have a 4-layer print: a yellow, a magenta, a blue, and a black. And this is what you would get. If you want to put text on it, so we're going to write something up here, and we want the text to be the color of the paper. So I'm going to make the text white, okay, and we'll write turkey. This is a poster turkey, or a turkey poster. That's a nice typeface. I hope you guys like Verlog. So now we've got this would be the color of the paper. So when we print the transparency, that would be on the yellow layer as white. Let's go in now, and yeah, I missed part of his jacket down here. Darn. I'm going to show you guys what I would do to get ready to print this thing. My yellow, let's put all of the yellow together. All of the yellows turned on. Let's change that color of the stroke to yellow. Say okay, okay. There's some kind of funkiness. What is that? Where is that coming from? We're going to have to get rid of that. Okay. So now this would be the yellow layer. I'm just going to flatten, merge all the visible, and then dump black into it. That's what the transparency is going to look like for yellow. And then magenta, do the exact same thing. Pour black into that. So you have to print each one of these transparencies individually. Does that make sense? Because when you make the screen, you have to block the light, and the black transparency is going to block the light. So you don't print a red transparency, you don't print a yellow transparency, you print all of your transparencies black, and you make the screen. The screens are, it doesn't matter what color you'll eventually put through there. You may come back, a day later and decide that you don't want to put magenta through there. You want to put some sort of orange translucent ink through there, and that's totally fine. You can put whatever color there, but to make this stencil, make everything black. And you do the same thing with the blue, and the same thing. This gets deleted. The same thing with the black. So that's how I would that's how I go in and I set up a poster. I try my best to start to keep deleting layers that I'm not using and merging the layers that I don't think I'm going to change. Text I leave as text until the very last moment. Then I merge everything, because text is constantly changing up until the last moment, because I can't spell or a date changes or whatever. I'm gonna show you guys how, if this is the exact same thing we just did. Do you guys know who Tom Waits is? Man, you guys are missing out. If we wanted to screen print a photo, I'm gonna do the exact same thing, and I'll show you guys what that would look like. We'll make this 16 by 24. Tom Waits is a singer. Sounds like he's drank a lot of whiskey in his life. If I wanted to make this into a screen print, one way that I would do it would be the exact same way that I just did it a second ago. We need to turn it into CMYK, okay? And then go through and separate each one of the channels. So you have your cyan channel, your magenta channel, yellow, and your black. And I'll show you guys what this looks like. 24 by 16, okay. You have to do the exact same thing. New. I'm going to drag each one of the channels over. We'll start with cyan. Drag that back over. Oh, whoops. Oh, maybe I need to turn all of them on. Why won't it let me drag it? Bear with me. Okay, it's just not going to let you deal with the CMYK image. you're going to drag each one of those 4 layers back over there. You would apply cyan, magenta, yellow, black in that order. When I print, I would most likely print yellow to be the 3rd color, so I'd print cyan or magenta first. They have about the same in tonality. And then I'd print the yellow 3rd, and then I'd print the black layer last. If you want to add a little registration mark off of your canvas, like somewhere that you can cut that off later, you can put registration marks just to help line things up. Something like this isn't bad because you're going to have that corner that you can line things up over and over and over. What this is going to end up looking like is kind of a printer from the 1970s with really big dots that make up the photograph. I've got one that I was already working on that I can show you. I think it's in here. Yeah. So yeah, this is that's my great grandmother. That's my mom. This is all of the layers individually. So I've got my cyan layer. I zoom in, nothing but dots. Then I would print my magenta layer over top of that, yellow layer over top of that, and then finally the black layer. And you end up getting what looks like, you know, a really grainy photograph. If you have a super high mesh count screen, you can get ridiculous detail with this. If you have about a 158, 180 mesh count screen, which that may be, you know, completely foreign to you, this is about the quality that you can expect to get, you know, by screen printing that. Do you guys have questions about that? About printing like CMYK halftone images? What have I left out in designing for, like, getting something ready for a poster that you guys think is necessary that you do not understand? Or questions that you have about Photoshop that maybe I could help you with right now? The main thing is just keeping all of your layers somewhat clean, and having them, you know, when you finish, having them divided up into this is my paper, which is the canvas. I can't call it a canvas. I'm going to call it my sheet of paper, and then have the layers actually set up where this is the first color I'm going to print. This is the second color I'm going to print, and my key plate, which is going to be black. That's going to be normally it's going to be a darker color. That's going to be my top layer. So I have those things set up like that in Photoshop before I go to actually screen print them. I want to show you guys the thing that you guys were pointing out the other day, that Justin, this is the little banana that Justin had put on his Instagram. It kind of reminded me of some of the when Jay does his mono prints, where he'll print one poster and then he'll print one layer on this piece of paper and then he'll print another layer of a different poster on another piece of paper, and you end up getting these transparencies where, you know, it references 15 things that happened in the past, and then it gets brought together by something like this. You know, this one drawing of the banana, you know, with that you can see through, and you see all these things that aren't really related, and it looks like the banana is probably a slightly different yellow than the background is. This is also something that you guys could do just by layering things on top of other things, and then in the end, you know, get 2 colors, 2 layers to bring that together so that you have all of this other information that turns into background noise. Yeah, and you know, Jay does it just by it's a process of printing just to make sure that the screen is charged, that everything is going to look the way that it does, and you make one and you throw it in the trash. Instead of throwing it in the trash, he convinces people like me to give him $200 for them. So I so far have not been able to convince people to do that. But I think this is also something that's really nice that you guys can do with screen printing by changing the transparency of the ink. Any questions at all, like, or any Photoshop questions that you think may help you that I could go over really, really quickly right now that you don't understand, or that I did something that you don't agree with, or I did something in a roundabout way that you would do differently, or how do you do this, or how do you do that? Yeah.
So when you're doing those images for example, like the black outline,
Yeah.
like for example, we use banana as a jacket, and that black outline, you're going to draw something.
if I were going to draw this banana, I would probably draw this in my sketchbook, and I would scan it, and then I would go in and do the same thing, via threshold. If I wanted to use this picture that Justin drew, I'm going to have to change the image size because this is tiny, 300, and we'll make that, let's say 9. It's going to be fuzzy. You're going to get the fuzzy edge of the banana. Now, I can come in here and I could do threshold, but it's probably going to give me a ton of other information that I don't want. And so you can slide this guy back and forth until you get something that you like. You may have to do this 3 or 4 times on different layers, and then take parts of one drawing and add it to a part of another drawing. What I could also do would be, you can go in and and delete the yellow layer or delete the red, on this. Or you could just open the pen tool and spend an hour just drawing, just tracing what he did, like this, and then you have a nice vector drawing of this Elvis banana. I'm assuming it's Elvis banana. I don't know. So there's a number of different ways, and depending on the project, is going to be that's going to change the way that I would approach it. If the thing is going to end up being really scratchy, yeah, I may just go in and say threshold, and it's going to be super textured. It's going to have all these kind of crinkly edges, and then the next thing that I put down will probably have crinkly edges too. If I want something to be really clean, then I would go in with the pen tool and draw it. Something else that you can also do, if you end up getting this, and I want to make this into a vector. So right now this is a raster image, and I want to make this into a vector. What I would do would be, and they used to call it live trace in Illustrator. What do they call it now? Is it image trace? Yeah, they changed the name about 5 years ago, and for some reason I'm stuck on live trace. But this is my roundabout way of doing image trace in Photoshop. I'm going to select everything that's black, and then I right click on that, and I'm going to tell it to make a work path. Now this work path, if the tolerance is 1, the path is going to follow the curve as closely as possible. So you'll get almost exactly what we're looking at right here. If I bump this up to, let's say 8, it's going to look more like a wood block print where the curves turn into sharp angles. So we'll do that and see what happens. If you do not have, if you're like running around with a laptop with 4 gigabytes of RAM, yeah, this is going to fry it. So you see it turned, I don't know if you guys can see the path, if I can turn this off. If you guys can see the path, no, that didn't help. And that doesn't help. But the path is right here. So it kind of follows the black, but not really. So now we have a vector path of this thing. The way that I would turn this into a vector shape, I need a shape layer, so I'm just going to click over here, and now I've got a shape layer. And I can come over to paths, put it on work path, say cut, put it on shape, and say paste. And so now I can turn my raster image off, deselect everything, and this is my vector shape that used to be that. So you can see how it turned the round things into pointy, kind of wood blocky looking. But now I can come in here and I can move these points just like you can, just like all vector images have these little arms that you can adjust. So that's another way that I would also do that also. And you could also export this into Illustrator as a vector image now to work with in Illustrator, or blow this up the size of a billboard without losing resolution and have it maintain its crispness. Does that make sense? Do you guys have other questions? Something like that? If you end up doing something, and if you're designing something for screen printing, or if you just have a Photoshop question and you're not sure how to do something, yeah, send me an email, and I'll do my best. If all I do is type your question into Google and watch a bunch of YouTube videos, I'll do that, and then I'll reply to you because I'll learn how to do something. So All right. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. Now I'm going to stop.